So I was listening to a radio talk show the other day when I was on my way to work, man. It was the K-Love radio station. And, these radio stations, they have questions that they ask and people call in and talk about it. And one of the questions that they asked the other day was, how do Christians deal with cursing, bad language, vulgarity in the workplace? And I'm driving and I'm sitting there, I'm listening to this radio station, and there wasn't a lot of people calling in. There was some, and all of them had such deep concerns and fears and worries. They didn't know how to handle it, and it was a big issue. And man, I tell myself, I understand it. It doesn't matter where I have worked at. It has always been a huge issue, the language, the vulgarity. And so I said, man, let me just make a quick video about the language that people use in the workplace, because I think that as believers, we need to be aware of our surroundings, but we also need to know and understand how to handle these different situations. And so my intent with this video, man, and I'm going to ask you to watch it all the way to the end, because at the end, I'm going to give you some very specific ways on how Christians can handle being in these situations where you go into a workplace and unfortunately it is just full of vulgarity. Now, one thing I want to say right at the rip is that as believers, we need to understand that we live in the world, that Jesus Christ is on the throne, but he's on the throne of heaven. And right now in the world that we live in, Satan is very much in charge. And so people in the world are going to do worldly things. They're going to talk in worldly ways. I was reading an article on LinkedIn by a gentleman by the name of Mark Wolford. He's the director of MYM Consulting. Now, this is just a brief part of the article that he wrote, and I'm going to read this to you. He said, having a bit of a potty mouth, I was greatly excited by the recent scientific findings that those who swear are of higher average intelligence, have a bigger vocabulary, a better ability to deal with emotional situations, and have a higher pain threshold. This got me thinking about how it relates to the modern workplace and whether swearing is more or less acceptable these days. And so listen, I read that and I look at that, and the very first thing that comes to my mind is that is the current world view. That's how people in the world view it. To them, cursing is just a natural aspect of what we do in the world today. And if I'm being honest with you, before I came into Christ, I had no problem cursing. I had no problem swearing. I had a bit of a, as he says, a potty mouth. But when I came into Christ and he renewed me and changed me, one thing that he did take away was the use of those words. But I think that we need to understand as Christians that, again, the world that we live in, this is what we're going to expect. When we go out on job interviews, when we go into companies, this is just what they deem as normal. So I guess the question then becomes, when do we say enough is enough? When does it stop being socially acceptable and flat out hostile? Because one thing I think that we need to take a look at is that certain language is deemed hostile. Certain language is deemed abusive. Certain language is deemed destructive. And so when do executives and owners of companies see this type of language as being destructive, not only to their company, but to the employees that they hire? When do companies say enough is enough? I think that this needs to be a question that is answered by all HR departments for any company that has employees with them. The second thing is, what do companies do when a person that they want to hire, because not everybody lives the same way, when a person that they want to hire may be a Christian, maybe somebody of another religion, right? But that person just doesn't want to be a part of the cursing, vulgar, hostile environment, right? They can deal with everything else, but they just don't want to be a part of that. And that is what is the culture of that company. What do companies do with that? Well, listen, man, coming from my background, one thing that I know is that most companies that have that culture, unfortunately, upper management also fits into that culture, meaning they got no problem being vulgar. They have no problem using abrasive words, right? But I think that in the day and age that we live in today, this needs to be a serious question. This needs to be something that's seriously thought out with all the different groups and all the different sects and all the different things that are going on in our world today. I think that this is also a very serious matter. Certain people feel that the use of abusive jokes and jesting create a hostile work environment to the point that they don't want to go into that job anymore. So what do companies do that rely on these people? I think at some point they have to take a stand and they have to ask themselves, is allowing this the right thing for our company? Because we may potentially lose good people. Again, as Christians, how do we deal with this? One, again, we have to understand and recognize that we are in the world. And people in the world are going to do what worldly people do. They're going to curse. They're going to be vulgar. To us, this may be a form of disrespect. To them, this is just casual conversation, right? So at some points, we have to understand that. So what do we do? How do we deal with this? Let me give you 3 things. As believers, listen, you have a choice. Your choice is this. Number 1, you can quit your job, a job that you've been on for a very long time. If the vulgarity, if the verbal hostility is becoming too much for you, step away from your job. If that's what through prayer and conversation with God is leading you to, you may have to walk away from that and find employment elsewhere. Here's the second thing. What you can do is you can express your concern to your direct supervisor and hope that they can help create a change within the company. Again, one thing that I found is that a lot of times when companies have this issue, it's not just the lower level employees. It's mid-range management. It's upper management where types of vulgarity, abusive gesting, and joking take place. And so, again, as a Christian trying to function in this world, you have to pay your bills and take care of your family, right? After you've expressed your concerns to your management, if they can help make changes, fantastic. But if they can't, again, we come back to the very first step, which is sometimes you have to walk away from where you're at if it's truly affecting your spirit. Here's the third thing, and this is where I fall personally. Don't be afraid to tell your coworkers, and I do it respectfully, please don't use that language with me. I don't swear. I don't appreciate you swearing with me. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to run into 1 or 2 type of people. The first one is going to be the one that's very respectful. They understand it. I appreciate it. And they won't use that type of language with you. Will it slip sometimes? Yes. They'll apologize, correct themselves, and off you go. The second type just doesn't really care. They have a disrespectful attitude. That's just how they speak to them. It's normal. And again, we go back to what we said at the beginning. People in the world are going to do what people in the world do. And if that is what is acceptable to them, then that's just how they're going to speak. But one thing I want you guys to be aware of as I wrap this video up is God said in his word that he has not given us a spirit of fear. He's not given us a spirit of fear. So do not be afraid in any situation to course correct someone, to let them know who you are. I'm a man or a woman of God. I got respect for you. I work with you. We work together. But one thing we will not do is you can't talk to me like that or around me like that. And then you take it to God in prayer. But don't be afraid to be vocal. Don't be afraid to tell people how you feel about this. To me, again, I think this is a huge issue, especially in corporate America, where it's become just the norm. But I think if companies want to keep good people, and Christians are good people, we work hard. The Bible says, work as if you're working unto God, right? So we're good people. We work hard. And if they want hardworking, good people to come into their companies, then I think they need to work harder at changing the culture in those companies. This is your man Mel with Mel's Block. Man, y'all be blessed until next time.